people. It's also represented by Councilmember Annabelle Palmer in District 18 and Community Board 9, whose district manager is William Rivera. So we're excited about future programming in the space and the long-term maintenance of the plaza. And I will turn it over to the design consultant, Thomas Wilson.
Thank you, David. Hi, and we are, my office, Thomas Wolsey Associates, is just delighted to be part of this project. It's these little incremental increases that make New York a better place. That doesn't, that keeps our attention on spaces like this. So, left leads forward today. So as David mentioned, the plaza has already sprouted up and generated an awful lot of activity in the neighborhood, and we all know how important these small spaces can be to the vibrancy of a neighborhood. So I'm gonna, well, no. Okay. So just to put you in context, the site is right here. Westchester Avenue is here. The L is here. It's a very busy L. And Bronx River Parkway is here. And along the edges of Bronx River Parkway is Parque de los Niños. And the corner of that park, which is mostly ball fields, etc., and the corner of that park is also a new initiative by the Parks Department, which is across the street. And we're going to be in dialogue with one another in that regard. In the design excellence approach to these projects, these are the 5 guiding principles. I won't read it for you, but they do in fact guide our work as we move along. And I'm going to give you a very quick glimpse of the site. From this view, we're at the sort of the corner of the L. We're looking down Morrison, and this is the park just beyond. Just some peeks into the park. What you're going to see as you go through this tour with me is a park or a plaza, if you will, that's really lined by sidewalks, and then it's dirt. And the reason it's dirt is because there are 3 very large trees whose root systems are exposed very close to the trunk. Parks Department has wisely kind of stayed away from them, so when all else fails, dirt will suffice, and that works well with movable chairs as well. This is the that little park initiative I discussed that's under construction. An unpleasant street that moves down along the edge. I've forgotten the name of this one. There, area. Thank you. There is a bus shelter on the site now. And this is a little piece of what is a bioswale that's part of that park initiative. This is our site over here. The streets across the street. This is the corner of our street, and this is the L. And as David mentioned, this community has been very interested in the outcome of this project. We've had sessions out on the site discussing the project and showing them 3 different approaches to the design. And the site, zooming in on the site, this is pretty much the site. It's very tight, although we're getting a little bit of extra room with the moving of the curb. You'll see that in the next slide that shows you we have a little bit of a neck down here, and the curb is going to be moving out. There'll be a bus stop over in here. And this is an area we hope to have a speed table. It's like a speed bump on steroids. It's expanded to help for pedestrian circulation. We're very fortunate that the utility lines are not running through the site. In fact, long ago, this in fact was a street that came down here, but it is not troubled by the utility obstructions that we would normally encounter. So there'll be a redesigning of the surface drainage. Circulation is mostly along Morrison Avenue and Westchester Avenue. There's a little bit of cross circulation around here, and then there's the park there as well. Now the concept for the park really had to pay very close attention to what I would call the 2 primary driving goals. One was preserve these trees. They're really spectacular trees. And that is a very difficult thing to do when you also have a program that wants to have lots of people and lots of activity and use. So we had to come up with a concept that was really doing both of these things. So we focused on the trees, creating just enough planting around the two southern trees so that their root systems would not be disturbed, but there would be still good porosity to the space. And then the third tree, which is further north, closer to the L, closer to that activity of Westchester Avenue, rather than do the same, we chose to actually introduce what we call a raised public platform that's in effect floating above the root system. So there's no chance of damage to the roots, but yet we can still have people occupy that platform in the many ways that people find to recreate themselves. The other part of it is, right now it's surrounded by a paved concrete sidewalk, and it should remain that way, but we took a section and brought all those three elements together with a stone dust pavement in the middle. And that also is going to help very much with the porosity factor for the root system. And it also makes kind of a granular texture under your feet. You feel like when you're in there, the chairs and tables are in there, you're really out of the beaten path. You're in a somewhat sheltered area. Now, all the tables and chairs can be moved aside, and they can have their events in the middle, which was one of the list of goals that they had set for us. But the space feels a little bit warmer, a little bit off the beaten path. And lastly, you'll notice there's an interesting paving pattern here. And maybe I would say the third goal was the community wanted this to be very distinctive. They wanted it to have a certain character that was different than other plazas. And we thought long and hard about the paving patterns and what we could do with the paving. And then of course, we were saddled by the requirements of DOT requirement for standard paving. So ultimately, I should just go back one minute. Just in terms of how people will use this and enjoy it, there's a possibility, we hope it will come, of a future little food kiosk that might happen here. This will be the bus shelter when the curb is moved away. As I mentioned, this is that platform that people can occupy, but does not impact the root system. There's a little bit of planting along the Bank of America building that provides backdrop for standard city benches. And then there's seat walls along these edges that would face the activity core, and then just curves and a few seat walls along the other edges for people who just want to watch the traffic, the pedestrian traffic walk by. So it's a very simple approach that we think has a very large impact on the community. And then, of course, there are concerns about the dimensions. We indicated that we've studied the dimensions for the porosity of the space. These are some cross sections. This is just a close-up of the paving approach. You can see the pattern working itself all around, and then this is the stone dust. So, and this entire area that was once dirt is still a very porous paving, and still the roots are going to be in good shape. Just the kind of seating I described, from seat walls to platform to benches. And of course, just some examples of the kind of site furniture that will be in the space, typical of these small little plazas that are sprouting up all around the city. And we've been very concerned, there have been concerns about will people be sleeping on the benches? Of course, we've been hearing about that since the 70s, I can tell you. So we've changed the elevations of the seat walls so that not only can you not sit on them, but you can't skateboard on them. And then, well, how do you do a wall around a root system that you're very concerned with? So we came up with this idea of a grade beam that will actually span the root system and be supported, be supported by small piers, rather. And that works with the platform, and it will also work with the granite blocks that will sit on that grade beam, and then we can adjust these piers out in the field when we actually encounter the roots to make sure that they're slipping down between those major roots. So minimal root disturbance. And then enough planting to provide some seasonal interest that's without irrigation, so it's got to be very sustainable that way. And then there are some beds that have been provided to the community group for its garden program that they want to bring to the plaza. So here are just a few images. The main area in the middle will be the cluster for the movable tables and chairs. Seat walls around the edges. You can see the effect of the pattern of the pavement. And then just different view angles of that. We got very good cooperation from the Bank of America. They're very much in support of the project. So the idea of putting planting along their building, obviously keeping free of the entrances, allowed us to expand the effect of the green on the plaza. And this is the final plan. So welcome to any questions or comments.
I did see one thing, and I'm here to be supportive. It said stone dust or alternate. Are you getting pushback on stone dust?
Not that I know of. I don't know how the word alternate got in there. Jim?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a comment from DOT just on the maintenance of stone dust, and we want to make sure that we're keeping alternates open. I think the stone dust it certainly can work as a great material. I think just because it's a preliminary design, we want to make sure we've looked at all of the options.
But whatever that other alternate might be, it has to be porous, right?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
And there are a lot of those. Yeah. They just cost more money.
I have a question about your placement of the bike racks and along that open space. Was that the only place that you considered? It just seems in a way a little obstructive to what that nice long view would be like.
Oh, let me go back to that. I can't remember where we finally decided to do that. Oh,
You got the bus shelter and the bike
Yeah.
racks along Morris Avenue.
well, you know, it's interesting. I mean, there's different schools of thoughts. One is put all of that, you know, that's an amenity strip along the street that's used to seeing those kinds of things. We see that in the city also, the bike racks along there. It's such a small plaza. It's got an awful lot of stuff in it already.
Yeah.
So our approach was, let's let it be more street furniture and keep the plaza free of another obstruction like that. That was the thinking behind it. Obviously,
But it couldn't go on either Herrick Place or on.
it could have gone in either way. The question is really, usually people who want to put their bike in a bike rack, if they're about to use the plaza, they want to have good visibility.
Of where the bike is.
And we thought that that was Westchester, Morrison Avenue was better than that.
Those are great benches. They really solve a lot of problems. Very, very smart idea.
It goes nicely with the bid. The kiosk design, is that something that is waiting for the next phase?
Next phase, Emily, can you speak to that?
So this is what we've been putting in our projects as a placeholder. We at DOT, separately of any individual plaza project, are working on a standard design for a plaza kiosk for the commission's request. And we're actually getting very close to having something to show you. So this would be a placeholder for that permanent kiosk design.
I'm sure, I'm speaking for everyone, we would want to see that kiosk design before anything goes up, permanent or temporary.
This is
Great.
you know, it's interesting, the oak trees that you have are sort of every architect's fantasy, right? They're already limbed up.
So perfect.
They're just perfect. This is a model of how, if you leave trees alone, how they can become your friend.
Yeah.
Great. Good project. Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Thank you.
completion and new work of art, or purchase art by appropriate artists. That's essentially what Campbell's going to tell you about. It worked out very well many times. And it's something that actually is quite good for the artists often, and it's quite good for the site. So I just wanted to say that's sort of the direction we're going in. I'll take a backseat and let Kendall describe what's going on.
Good morning. Kendall Henry, the Assistant Park Director. I just want to give you a bit of background as to where we were a couple of years ago. Pablo Vieira, one of our process, and was commissioned to do a number of artworks for the Rockaway Library. He submitted he did a conceptual submission in September of 2014, where he presented two ideas. One was the Feynman Code, to use the Feynman Code as part of the artwork, and another was creating a Rockaway alphabet to be incorporated within the architecture of the library. As he was developing these two ideas, it became very frustrating, the process, and he expressed interest in terminating the contract. And so I had a conversation with him to encourage him to stay. And as part of that conversation, we determined that we would do a purchase format, which Tom Sustained had done before. And he agreed, and spoken to the library and to the architect and to DDC, and everybody was on board with the idea of purchasing. So as a result of that, I just want to show you a little bit, give you a background, a little bit of the information on the project itself, and show you some of the sites we've selected to hang the work that is still being purchased. Again, the project site is in Far Rockaway. This is just going really quickly to give you an idea of the location of where the new library will be, existing locations here. And this is where we have determined is the most prominent location within the library. It's the second floor. I know there was some conversation initially about why not the first floor. The first floor in this library is a transverse space. As people come in, they go directly to the second floor where a lot of the activity happens. And this is one of the sites. It's again an above height level upper wall in the adult area. And you could have an idea of as you come up the stairs. This area right here. And the other one is the children's area. Again, the sites are away from the reach of anyone, but it's very prominent in terms of its location. And these are some elevations as to where they are and size. And part of Pablo's initial concept was to engage the community in certain ways, and he wanted to sort of keep that concept. We can go back a little bit. When we are doing within the purchasing process, Pablo, we will be purchasing some works from Pablo to be determined, and also some other community members as well, or some other artists within the community. We will determine what that process is exactly later on. This allows us enough time to do it properly. But Pablo has expressed interest in remaining, in keeping with his idea of engaging somehow with the community in creating either new work or creating works to be placed in the library for us to purchase. Since Sandy, there's been a lot of cultural activities happening within the Far Rockaway area, and we have a lot of connections, dialogues, conversations with what's happening there in terms of culture, and we're going to tap into some of that, have Pablo tap into some of that to reach the community and reach other artists as well. And this is it.
Yeah, I'm really concerned about how you were going to hang a bunch of different artists' work in these very high spaces that are very tough to see anyway, which, you know, one of them has a strange shape. That actually just doesn't make any sense.
It might just be Pablo, and he gets first refusal, so to speak. And then if there's any left over, then we go to the community. He's working in a number of bodies of work, and being that we're years ahead, he will know what the sites are and he will work accordingly to the work that fits within those locations.
Is it known whether it'll be a two-dimensional flat work or a sculptural leaf or anything like that?
The space allows for low relief and two-dimensional work. It can be secure.
From the ceiling or from the
From the
actual
wall itself, yes, it's durable enough to hold some heft.
I'm not sure I understood what you just said from it will be Pablo's decision, that is the works of art and their location. Is that what you're saying, that will be integral to his conception?
Yes.
And so hence the locations that you're showing, as well as the potential multiple works of art, go together in the eyes and goals of the artist? Is that what you were saying?
Pretty much. So when we approached Pablo with this idea, we said we'll identify a few locations, most prominent locations in the library, and let you know what they are, and you would put forward some works for us to purchase. These are works that may be existing, these are works that we would create anew, but knowing what the sites are and how they would fit within the sites, the PC will have that information.
And I just follow with two other questions. One, as mentioned, it looks very, very high, and particularly it seemed to me for the children's room, they're, the 4'2" kids will be looking really high up, and I just wondered how that would work, since the relationship of the children to works of art is so important, and that.
Yeah, so I think there's quite a bit of space, one, to sort of stand back and see the work, and again, it's dealing with scale, the proper scale to sort of fit that distance and that height. So these are just some issues that we have to resolve with the artists in terms of how big the work is or how big the work would be. So it's not that issue of bringing what's next to try to scale it.
Just a second question. You mentioned the ground, the first floor, the entrance floor. You said that it's a transfer or something.
Yeah, you come into the library and you either go towards the back or you go upstairs. Most of the activities are.
So in its activities and its aesthetics, is that is ruled out for any art? That's the way you, the library and others see it, is to go up?
Yes, we had, initially, we had the same concern of why not the first floor, and we explored all different angles and ways and places on the first floor, and it just wasn't feasible. It didn't make
Is there any
sense.
images of that, or is there?
Not in this presentation.
Wasn't it supposed to be originally in the glass wall as you walked in?
Yes.
And what was determined what was unfeasible about that?
Well, for purchasing a work,
Well, not purchasing work, what was unfeasible about having an artwork on the glass wall?
well, because now that we're purchasing, it's hard to put something in.
Purchasing
But
came
that's
way
it.
later. That
The
was,
purchasing was later.
Yeah.
Right, the purchasing is a result of something that happened based on a program that was appropriate and thoughtful and responsive to the artist's wishes and the Present of the Arts program. Buying a bunch of art and putting it in a place where no one can see it up above a bunch of doors of bathrooms is a compromise of a serious nature and a degradation of an absolutely terrific artist's work, I would think, who's passionately interested in books. Right? I'm sure you know his work, but his major work was the disappearance of bookstores and books available to Spanish culture, and to have something that could resonate with a community like this one, and decide that it's fine to buy artwork from him and hang him on an elevated wall. I think we need to hear more about why you think that's a good idea.
Well, it's not just my idea, it's sort of a conversation with the artist. Like,
Is the artist here?
oh, he's not here today.
Did you invite him?
I did not invite him. But it was from a conversation with the artist in terms of what some of the, what can we do to sort of not let you just say no to this project and terminate the contract.
But the no must have come from a dialogue, right? We looked at two earlier proposals, right? The Miniman code and the Far Rockaway font, both of them interesting ideas that were going to be integrated into a highly prominent, highly visible part of the library itself, consistent with the objectives I would imagine to present for the arts. And all of a sudden, there, without any sort of understandable explanation, we're now looking at locations for art that were maybe purchased of an undisclosed nature from the artist if he so chooses. I don't think that's fair to the commission to have that level of a dramatic change without a better explanation in here. That's just a personal view.
I would echo that. I introduced the question about the ground floor, and I certainly have a number of the same concerns.
I don't see how we can approve the locations without knowing what the artwork is.
Yeah,
I mean,
I
that to me is, I mean, I completely support what Commissioner Aaron said, 100%. But beyond that, I can't even possibly approve what's being offered as a compromise until I see whether the art looks appropriate on it.
And just on a side note, when we start our process, we usually have the locations first before we initiate an artist process. So this is not very different.
But we have a location. The location was the ground floor last fall. Had a location. Now you're coming
Can I
back.
step in also? So I was actually at a meeting here, even though I haven't been intimately involved in this phase. We had a meeting, Carrie, if you remember, at this very table with Pablo and with some other commissioners. Was anybody else here from that? So there were these, in-depth discussion of those two proposals, both of which ended up with a dead end. That they weren't somehow going to work out in relationship to the architecture, in relationship to the sentiment by the agency and the community. So those were dead ends, and that happens in percent-for-art projects from time to time. So we have to, in a way, sort of put that aside. Am I representing this correctly from the team? I know this is what was happening when I sat here at the table was that.
Well, what we had discussed was that, the commission really liked the Feynman Code project. We understood that other members of the team really liked the Far Rockaway project. So what we left that meeting with the understanding was that Pablo would undertake a series of workshops in the community to let the community give him feedback on the two proposals and then come back with whichever one was the most appropriate from those meetings. So I don't know what happened after that, though.
So, I mean, what happened after that, as I understand it, maybe Kendall, you could describe what happened. But there was enough pushback for both proposals that both were in.
From the community?
From everybody.
Who's everybody?
Yes,
From the library, from the architect, from some of the community.
And even so, from the point of view of the PBC, there was pushback at some level to changing from the Feynman, right, to the alphabet. That's what was happening at the table when I was discussing the
There was support for the original, for the
Yeah, so there was pushback for the, so there was
But
original.
ultimately, the commissioners agreed to go whichever one was chosen by the community.
But there was,
Just from a perspective of an artist that is maybe in the process of, it sounds like having to come here to have a meeting is one level up. This is going to be a lot of work, and then having to go back to the community, get more approval is going to be another level of work. At which point I might say, thank you, because I can't imagine why an artist like Pablo would try to walk away from a project like this in this place, unless it was going to be too much rigmarole. And I do think this solution is, maybe it's not ideal, but I also think if it is a matter of a compromise between artists not being able to have their full vision, per se, but also without disrupting what the community wants. It seems these walls are already there, so something was going to go on them either way, I would hope. So I know there is a question about what work and et cetera, as far as is it okay to just give him a blank check when we already know there's been controversy over what he was proposing. But I definitely seems like he would be a great artist to have in the portfolio and in the space. But I'm pretty sure he didn't just say he didn't want to do it because.
Well, we don't know that, this is not here.
Well, and we also don't know, there was a paragraph about, well, it might be Pablo, but it might be somebody else, and it might be a whole bunch of different work. And to Pablo, who I'm sure could take the space, even though it is not ideal over the bathrooms, Phil said. You know, take the space and curate it with his work in a way that he felt was not too much of a compromise. That's one thing, but purchasing a bunch of work
Well,
that we don't, I don't understand, I don't approve of that.
Well,
And I think it goes against percent for our program, really.
But let me just clarify, again, being that we're so, this is just to identify the sites. And being that we're really early in this process, you know, again,
Yeah, but I've been around this block a few times, and I know that we identify the site, and then you come in and you say, oh yeah, but we have the site, so now we're stuck. You know, that's a bind, I don't think it's fair to put us in. You know, I'm sorry, but I've seen it happen many times, not just percent for art, but many different agencies, you know, and like to force us to compromise with something that we don't even know what the program is. I don't feel comfortable with that.
I mean, let's sort of pull this apart. You're coming to us with 2 new locations, optional, I guess, one or the other.
looking
But
at.
I guess I would ask Hank's question, which is what was going to go on those walls if there weren't art, paint?
No, there's no plan for that. That the library has indicated.
They weren't to exist at all, or?
No, they wouldn't be there, there's big white walls. And they're actually, in the defense of those locations, they're very, very prominent in this space. They start from 8 feet all the way up, and they are also kind of the only walls there that aren't filled with doors. I mean, obviously they're above doors. There are very few other non-glass walls.
Okay, so that's question number 1 answered. They were going to be just white walls. Okay. Number 2 is it Pablo or is it Pablo Plus?
It's Pablo, and if Pablo chooses to have a plus, it'll be Pablo Plus. But we go with Pablo first.
And thirdly, will you show us what Pablo is, what work is being purchased?
Yes.
And when is the library scheduled to be completed?
Starts construction is scheduled for next summer, and then it'll take approximately about 2.5 to 3 years. So there's plenty of time to get that.
Okay, so
Big old spaces for 148,000. I mean, that's a lot of walls.
I'm still like confused about why
It just doesn't make any sense.
it would be a conflict with the architect. Or, I mean, I know his work, and I'm positive that whatever design he would have done on the glass would be amazing and a great contribution to the neighborhood. So I'm just kind of really confused about why all of a sudden his work has been shuffled up to the 7th floor instead of being as grand as it should be.
These locations are some of the original options as well. The glass wall and the team was an option, as were these walls. And he liked the idea of integrating it into the glass. And we were okay with at that point, was the font that we were talking about. And we were okay with that font and that glass. I'm not sure what happened in meetings subsequent to last time we saw that.
So,
You can be sure that I will say, it didn't just happen all of a sudden. This is a long process of proposals and pushbacks and different parts of different teams liking different things. So that I think that those ships have now sailed, sadly. Is that correct? There's no going back to that.
Why is that? For building this?
In 3 years.
Yeah, it's a year before it starts construction and 3 years before it's finished, doesn't it? Seems
Again,
like
this is driven by the artist. You know, this is what he wanted to do. I think he has something. No, he's not here. He's going to stay. But
I guess we can keep going around and around.
It's just so that
The reason that this site doesn't bother me so much is because I've been on other panels with libraries, and I don't think I was here for this one, but I thought this was a different library where basically a similar wall of bathrooms where when we were in the Percent for Art meeting, this was a designated space. I do know that like Jose Carlos did one on glass and another library, but to me it's maybe, I know there isn't a lot of money to do something that big, which is I think a major concern, but outside of that, I think to me it doesn't, if I also grew up in a library, the Sean Brooks Center for Research in Black Culture, and so there are high murals there. To me that doesn't bother me as much. I do think there are good questions to be raised, but I don't think it's, and I personally think it's as, if it were that little bit of money also,
Is appropriate to the
like
site.
I were the artist, I'd be like, I'm not gonna come back for 5 meetings and then be told no by anybody for that. So I think the idea of going back, that I don't know what happened, but that would be an obstacle that I think, because the problem with the thing percent for our projects is for artists, like at what point, it's very hard to make a profit on a project like this, because the amount of hours that you spend over years working on it, it may seem like a big budget at first. So I do think, there are a lot of tough questions, but it doesn't seem kind of, the space doesn't seem that bad compared to other panels I've been on for Percent for Art.
These are very good points and practical ones, but I think that we all need more clarification within the process. The statement "that ship has sailed," which is a very definitive statement, and
On the two initial.
I'm sorry.
Just on the two initial ideas.
I appreciate it, yes, I have not been around the block on that, on this one, that also I'm just trying to understand and to respect what has been said. But for me, and perhaps for others, the presence of the artist and understanding of the artist's goals and wishes and the relationship to these locations are all quite important. If the other ship has sailed, as you have said so definitively, but there may have been many, many players in that ship having sailed, I don't want to mix the images too much, but I do think that we do need some integration in the presentation of the nature of the art, of what the artist would like, the process and the locations within the building. And while it has been a long time, I've been involved, but there is a construction period of 2 to 3 years at least, and again, not to delay and not to harm the artist, but to be able to be clearer about some of these questions which are of concern to a number of us.
So the idea here was to sort of conceptually introduce the idea, and then what we consider preliminary review, come up with more definitive actual artworks and placements and that sort of thing.
Okay, but conceptually, it's too conceptual. It's words rather than seeing the relation. It's preliminary, but we can't get the visual yet, and that is what would be helpful at the very least.
Yes, actually, that's what I was going to say, that normally when we approve a project in conceptual, the next time we see it is when it's done.
Right.
And I don't think we're going to accept that. We're going to suggest that this is step 1 of conceptual, but there's going to be a step 2 of conceptual. And step 2 is to come back with a proposal for the artwork, and then we will give it preliminary when it's installed. And if the artist would like to come, we'd also like to see what colors the doors are painted or what material they are, and not just this gray world, which I'm sure the architecture is not.
Well, there are 2 spaces also, there are 2 potential spaces.
Right, 2 walls.
But so that also questions, is it for him to do something on both of them, or?
It was the APR.
That was implied, wasn't it? That it would be 2 walls?
2 walls, yes.
Okay, that's another point. I echo what his husband said. It's conceptual, but we need another stage of the conceptual in order to understand.
So, just, let's keep that in our minds. Okay, thank you.
This is not my big day, right? This is like, I think that was a sad story. We have a sadder story, and the artist is here. And I just want to say, in my first round in city government in the early 90s, one of my proud first moments was at the opening of a pier on 107th Street on the East River. And I remember the opening and celebration, actually Kendall was there. That pier is in extremely bad shape. It's going to be demolished. And that, if you ever, okay.
Good morning, I'm Sheena Brand, I'm Parks and Design Commission liaison, and I think Tom really gave it away. So we have a pier that's located in East Harlem at 107th Street, right in the East River. As you can see, there are not a lot of open recreational spaces for the neighborhood, which is pretty highly populated. We're in the flood zone. Obviously, this pier experiences a lot of environmental forces. It's a rough river, and the pier, which was built in 1931, is showing its age. These are some existing shots of it. It was built by the Department of Docks for industrial use, but shortly after, it was changed to recreational uses. It has a lovely pavilion on top, which was really, the whole pier was enjoyed for many, enjoyed by many generations, mostly for fishing, for the open air breezes. Here you can see it again. This is the view that we have from the FDR. Today, because of the state of the pavilion, we actually have it cordoned off, so people are not able to go into the pavilion. This is the condition of the roof. And as you can see here also, a lot of the paving surrounding the pavilion is not in walkable condition, so we have those cordoned off as well. This is underneath the pier, just to show you what's going on. In the 90s, there was an extensive rehabilitation of the pier, at which time the Center for Art project went in. I'm sorry, did I introduce Andrea Morrow? She's our artist. Excuse me. You can see here that these piers are beyond rehabilitation right now. So what our project is going to do is we'd like to open up the pier for the short term, so the public can have access to this recreational space with the intention of hopefully raising funding for a new pier. You can see here again some of the damaged paving. This is an early iteration of Andrea's work. You can see it's really an integrated piece. It's not a standalone art piece. It was a paving piece of terrazzo that was supposed to be enjoyed by all. It was integrated into the fabric of the asphalt decking. Here you can see a picture in 1991, and sadly this is what it looks like today. Andrea was just telling us that shortly after it was installed, it began to fail, and that was partially because of how it was engineered. She chose terrazzo because we expected it to be a material that was maintenance-free, that it would have a little more longevity than it's proving to be. So here you can see what we intend to do is actually remove this pier to lessen the load off of the pier, and then put in a fence so that people coming onto the pier will be kept at the westernmost portion. And then this is the fence we're using. So I think that Parks has a relatively good record with maintaining and caring for our public art collection. I think for this piece, because it was meant to be functional art, it had a different burden of maintenance. And it was meant for our maintenance and operations crews to be able to remove snow, to clean it down. And I think that just because of its location in the middle of the river on a pier that has a lot of movement, it was just not maintainable. Did you have something that you wanted to add? Yeah.
Yeah, just from the get-go, it was just not engineered properly. And I don't think that, terrazzo can be outside, it just was not installed properly. And not by the installers, by the people who are involved in organizing the whole thing, the project engineer, etc. So, and the lighting was torn out immediately. What is wonderful about that place is that people can fish, and so with that barrier, which I think was existing, we may have painted it or something, it really gives access to the community because they can fish and and it's fabulous out there. It's just it's just a mess. It's hideous. So it would be great if that would still be able to happen, because it is to code. Anyway, it's a tragedy. I'm very glad you're dealing with it. I have no bad feelings about it. I think it has to be made accessible however you choose to do it. And yeah, it's important. That's all.
Well, obviously this raises a tremendous number of questions. And everything from, is an artist dissuaded from doing a particular kind of artwork that can't be maintained? Are sites selected that have a longevity of X number of years, which piers are on the shorter end of that? Do we not put public art in flood zones? There's a whole host of questions that this particular situation brings to mind, including who else would look at the construction details for a terrazzo installation. I've been out there recently. It appeared to me to be a terrible detail. How much the pier movement itself had to do with it, I can't speak to. Et cetera, et cetera. So I don't quite know how we approach that in 20 minutes today. I think that it's probably a much larger conversation. We'd really appreciate, Ms. Blum, that you're here and to hear your point of view. But I think that, sadly, your situation, raises a general question for the city, for us as presumably the keepers of the public art collection of the city. Maintenance is a general concern. And I frankly think it goes beyond the piece of art itself. And I certainly want to broaden this conversation to what the community is getting at the end of the day, and would like to know whether you're closing off the one part of the pier where they fish. So I'm totally opposed to this project that is being undertaken, but I want to separate the art from the project. So I don't know whether this situation really warrants a deeper dive into the topic of how we select sites for art. What is the maintenance protocol that, Jonathan Kuhn is here, he does an incredible job of maintaining the art collection that is under the jurisdiction of the Parks Department. This is an unusual piece. And, what does this say in terms of how we put constraints or not on artists? So I don't know what the best thing to do is, whether there should be sort of I don't want to call it offline, but a smaller group of people that really tries to figure out. Tom, are you concerned about this? Is this something we should be talking about?
Yes. I do think that like you say, Jonathan has a portfolio of works of art that are under his book, right? That you maintain. This was meant to be maintained by general maintenance, right? So when you get to that point, which is quite the case with a lot of other percent for art pieces and other agencies that don't have a monuments division, maintenance is a big issue. And that's something that Kendall and I talk about all the time.
Right.
We're at a point in the longevity of the percent for art program. It started in 1982, where we have to look carefully at that. And I think you're absolutely right. This is, like we were just talking, that trot's way too thin.
It's really,
it's patently obvious. But so there are little lessons like that to be learned, but the greater lesson in terms of maintenance is something I think we do have to take a deeper dive into. We're in the process now of rethinking. There's a hearing about percent for art on Thursday. It's now several decades in, 3 or 4 decades into this program. We have to take it seriously, absolutely. This brings up a whole bunch of issues that are very specific to this and others that are very general.
So I think, maybe if Karen, you can work with the Percent for Art program and DCA, whomever you handle, and figure out, I know there's a number of us that would be happy to.
Good.
This is not about, we're not here to chastise. This is a situation that we've seen more than once, but it raises to me a lot of, structural, in many senses of the word, a question about how we really think about the kinds of sites and rather than have this occur again. I sort of feel like Robert Moses gave us all that concrete, and 50 years later we're all wondering why the city has no money because concrete fails in 50 years, and these peers do as well. And is that what's our time frame? Anyway, so let's do that. I think that would be
the other thing is there are things that are very specific to this that aren't generalizable,
yes.
but the general topic is really.
I just volunteer work clearly as an agency, as my unit will, and more than that, to sit down and work with DCA on some of these issues, both the general and specific case. I think it will vary depending on what agency is jurisdiction, and we have to think long and hard about staffing the agencies and how they connect too. There are lessons learned even by one specific location like this sometimes, and then the broader issues as Tom described that we know, and we have to sort of really think about longevity, as he stated, the expectation of longevity. What does maintenance really mean? If it's remaking the piece endlessly, then that's not unacceptable. The city can assume that burden and so on. We have an ever-increasing collection in size. We have at best a static level of staffing or ever-decreasing staffing, so that's not a good equation. So how one connects those two, but often it does come down to the specifics of the location, and even small changes can actually improve the potential survival of the artwork for the long haul. So we're already talking much more about these issues, and maybe we should do so more formally.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Just, you mentioned in passing now, you just said which agencies might be responsible. So it's not something to answer now, but that it seems to me you were raising is, in fact, which agencies are responsible? Is it only parks for the, is that the question for the maintenance of this? There's other agencies. That's my point. That's which I immediately thought upon looking, and then you raise it. So clearly this is a significant question.
NYPD?
Exactly.
Public
So
library.
this is a bigger question. It's specific to this, but also the larger
Well,
question.
I'll just throw out one idea that I've talked about for years, is that we might take some of the things that we've done at parks with the public and private to address our collection, but perhaps create a unit that's more broadly governs the care of art citywide.
Right.
That would be good.
Now, just to be clear, again, not trying to muddy the waters here, but are you asking for approval on your proposal for the 107th Street Pier, or we're just talking today about the ZAD state of the art?
We're asking for approval. We'd like to move on with our engineering project to remove the pavilion, to open it up to the public.
Okay, well, I would say that I will not support that. But for one thing, you haven't given me any grounds to support what you're offering. I mean, there's no comparison of how much square feet people have today versus how much they get in the future, where the fence is, what you're doing about the railing on the east end, how you're fixing it, what the paving will be. I mean, you can't possibly be asking for approval on this.
Well, did you even finish your presentation?
That was it. Yes. But we have Eric Litzelato, who's our deputy director of
I know
engineering.
Eric well.
Who I think.
I know the condition of the pier. No, I want to hear the condition of the pier.
Well, he actually is very familiar though with working with the community to open it up and to meet those community needs.
I think 2 slides ago, there was the showing the damage. So, we had a report done about 4 years ago that did a level 1, level 2 inspection of the facility, including analyzing the concrete, and we found that it's got a limited lifespan just because of its age. A few more winters, and the ice is going to basically crack it to bits. And as you can see back in the slide a few slides ago, how that pile had no more concrete around the seal. So that's a condition that's pretty prevalent, and it's only going to increase with time. Go back to, yeah. So with that report was a request that we go back every 3 years. Not a request, but basically a recommendation, and that's pretty much the accepted time frame for inspecting this kind of waterfront structure. And when we went back with a kayak underneath it at low tide, we found that basically the entire eastern half of this pier, the deterioration had accelerated faster than the initial assumptions, such that when we ran the calculations for load capacity, this half of the pier can no longer hold the required weight of public access. So that's why we have to close this half of the pier.
On both the north and the south?
Yeah. It's basically the whole thing. There's a few piles that are still good, but when you analyze the whole structure on the eastern half, it's below the threshold for basically public use. As Sheena mentioned, the pavilion's already cordoned off because concrete is falling off of the roof, and there's a lot of problems with that, largely because of the harsh environment for maintenance. So our intention was always to remove this pavilion because restoring it would be putting a big investment on top of a substructure that we know is suspect within 10 to 15 years. So we wanted to remove the pavilion. That's how this project started, and just open the whole thing up and maybe put some benches out there just to have something in the meantime. When we went out in the late spring to do our basically second wave of inspections, we found that the condition was so bad that if we remove this pavilion, we're basically opening up all this space that's now can get loaded with people, that we can't allow it. And there's, with the budget we have of $500,000, there's really no repairs you can do that would be more than the most temporary of Band-Aids to keep the structure up. So we thought it would be worthwhile, with the money we have, open up as much of the pier as possible, close off the section that's not safe,
and then we get a few more years out of the pier until ultimately we're going to have to condemn it. I mean, I've been being pessimistic about this structure. We've been saying 10 to 15 years. I think maybe at our next inspection in 3 years, or at least the one after that in 6 years, I'm going to have to say we have to close the whole thing if we don't get funded by then. So our intention with this project is to give some kind of open space in that interim period. And since it's primarily removals, you know, that's not really it's not bad to use the monies on something we're going to have to remove anyway, as opposed to trying to fix it up in the meantime. We are going to do the curbing and the railing in kind, just with the materials that match. So this is our standard S rail that we buy and we replace all the time. We might even have some in stock in the maintenance shops that we're just going to replace the segments that are bad and the curbing segments that are deteriorated. We actually have to lift this up. And it's timber curbing, so we're just going to use pressure treated timber that will last easily the rest of the life of the structure. And then filling these holes either with concrete, probably with a concrete screed or with asphalt, or this asphalt.
I'm still not going to approve it. I think that the community deserves more than this. And if it takes another $200,000 or whatever it takes to provide something for short term, I fully agree with you that this is something that has to be removed anyway. It will fall in the river at some point, so that some portion of that money to do the removals makes sense.
Sure.
And if you're closing off the eastern half, you might as well remove the structure, otherwise you can't get around the pier. But I think that, I know too much about this pier.
Just enough.
And I do think that the community deserves more than that. Even if it's just some benches, some timber logs to sit on, whatever it is. I think that there needs to be some more, and honestly, this presentation was done really largely for the purposes of showing catastrophe, but if this is about showing what a community is going to get, I don't see it. So this presentation is not acceptable for the purposes of an approval on a temporary fix.
When we talked to the community, they did understand the reasons why we're close like that, and we're begrudgingly accepting that. I mean, we also have additional funding that hasn't come through yet that we were hoping to do a partial rehabilitation of the bulkhead area here, which is also necessary, and then spend additional money on some kind of landscape here, but we wanted to separate those
It doesn't
two
even
projects.
need to be landscape, it just needs to be a place to be.
Yeah, well, sorry, we were talking about this earlier. An engineer always says, when I say landscape, I really mean
the crap
everything
on top.
besides the concrete underneath.
So you're talking about safety and amenity.
Yeah.
That's the focus here. It's not safe
Right.
for all the reasons you described. It is not an adequate amenity for an important community that has in part been using the pier, and there are many other ways to use it. So that's what has to be addressed. So it's inadequate for what the community can do and deserves. And on another level, which is extremely important, it's not necessarily doing justice, if I may say, for the artist. I mean, in its location and the work. So it's just more has to be understood. Work, connection, coordination of agencies, and a real serious proposal that could allow public access and enjoyment.
A dignified public access is really what I think is missing here.
Yes.
Even though it's a short-term solution and half the pier is being taken away from them, it has to be dignified access, and it's not now.
If we could figure out what it's really gonna look like, there's no, we're not seeing that. You're only showing us what needs to be removed, but there's no adequate visual experience that we can have right now that we can even improve on.
If we could figure out how to add benches as an amenity, would that be enough? Because right now, we don't have plans to do that. But we
You've got to provide some reason for people to be out there, right? They can't fish anymore. They fish off the east end.
Right.
They don't fish off the south and the north. right? So you're taking away the one reason why people go there. So you've got to come up with a reason that other people now will go there.
The risk we run of, sorry.
This isn't on for a vote today anyway, so what we can do, we'll work with you guys on a resubmission.
But I just want them to
Yeah.
understand how passionate I am
Yes.
about that you're not doing enough here.
Okay.
And
I
that
think they
whatever it
understand,
takes,
right?
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll work on a resubmission.
Sure, just so, I mean, you know, like with all of our work on the east side, like we are thinking a lot about that sort of issue. The reason why this was kind of my decision to limit the scope like this was that the alternative is if we don't raise the funds to do an additional measure to make it more enjoyable and useful, we risk not being able to do anything and then closing here completely. So that's why I wanted to go ahead with just the simplest project, just to have something done.
but that's not, then it's going to be, let's just wait for it to fall down. Then you should be going out and getting the money for the full reconstruction.
So we really don't want to wait till it falls down. And Eric's doing everything
I mean,
to
you
protect.
know what I mean, don't
Yeah.
you have to condemn it.
To protect the space, because if it does come down, you couldn't build it
You
again.
can build it again, so your agency has got to get their act together quickly to start raising the money to do a permanent reconstruction of this. Understanding that you're now at least trying the life safety strategy, we can't wait. And especially if it's deteriorating faster than it was anticipated. Because then the community will have zero. They already have zero on the estimate. So, okay.
Could I just thank the artists for coming this morning?
Yes.
And also for your extraordinarily generous attitude toward the elimination of your artwork, which I think is quite beautiful.
Well, it was.
And we thank, it was.
And this is not my artwork anymore.
But we want to thank you for that initial conception, and for also being so, as I said, generous about
Thank you.
the rest.
Well, thank you for your
Appreciate it.
Hope to see you guys at the happy circus.
Yeah. Good. Public meeting is now commencing with the consent agenda. Items 25907 to 25936. Item number 25914 has been withdrawn. Please note the conditions of approval as recommended by the various committees and the recusals. Staff has noted Commissioner Morgenthau's recusal from item 25913 and Commissioner Shepherd's recusal from item 25913 and my recusal from item 25908. Are there any other recusals that I have not noted? No, let the record show there are no other recusals. For the record, there are no members of the public who have signed up to testify. Is that correct? On any of the consent items. Does anyone wish to testify? No. No, let the record show no one wishes to testify. Will someone make a motion?
I would move the adoption of the items indicated.
Thank you. We have a second. Thank you. All in favor, raise your right hand, please. Okay, that is a unanimous approval. So now we will move on to the public hearing with item 25937, installation of a prototypical newsstand 418 11th Avenue, southeast corner of 11th Avenue and West 36th Street. There are no recusals for this project, and as is our standard procedure, we will let the applicant give their presentation, followed by any public testimony, after which we will deliberate and vote. Pause.
me, I've been advising on newsstand applications for a few years now. I either advise or exclusively consult on these newsstand applications, so I've become very well aware of the guidelines, the restrictions through DCA, DOT, and the Public Design Commission here today. I think many of the folks at the table here have seen me work on several applications and present them as well. So I am very familiar with the general recommendations published by the PDC. And what I've just handed out to you is what's been published for a few years on their website of the general recommendations put out by the PDC for newsstand applications. Now, for this location and the following one, PDC, if I understand correctly, only has one objection, and that objection is to reduce the size of both of the newsstands. Both of the sizes we have presented have been approved by DOT, but PDC has asked to reduce the size of them. Okay. What I'm trying to accomplish here in regards to these applications and future applications is to get across to PDC and everyone here that the conditions of these individuals working in these newsstands have become dire situations in regards to their health and comfort of working in a steel box on a day-to-day basis with no cooling or heating ventilation. In addition to that, they're filled with merchandise, a lottery machine, backup soda and water, and I think everyone in this room can attest to say that almost every newsstand you walk past has merchandise laid out on the sidewalk. So while I understand and appreciate that you want to reduce the size by this much, that means a lot to a newsstand operator. Literally every inch on this right here counts for the newsstand operator. So in regards to this application, the following one, and the ones that I will be submitting in the future, I really highly encourage you to understand that when everything else is approved and these individuals put in 2 to 3 years of work on these applications, and you ask them to reduce it by 2 feet when everything else is already approved, it really affects the economic feasibility of this business that they're going to raise their family on. So those recommendations that you have in front of you that are sent to me in regards to objecting to this application, future applications, I need everyone to really understand that this is literally what you're saying. You're saying that they cannot have 24 more inches to run their newsstand. Because it's my understanding that you have no other objections. So that's what I'm trying to get across today. I don't really have to go through the PowerPoints because that's the only objection the commission has, unless I'm mistaken.
So maybe we'll discuss it, and thank you for explaining.
Sure.
The commission has spent a tremendous amount of time trying to formulate guidelines that could be universally applicable to newsstands that are specifically addressing this commission's sort of jurisdiction, which is aesthetics.
Sure.
And the way in which our sidewalks look and function, the way the streets feel and operate. And after a lot of time, much of which was before I even got here, we published these specific recommendations.
Sure.
You're suggesting, and I don't think that that's necessarily a bad idea, you're suggesting that we need to look at these recommendations.
Right.
I guess your advocacy is that we should eliminate any consideration of a 4-foot wide deep newsstand as being too shallow, correct?
No, I'm saying that, I'm saying the length. So
length
a 4 by 12, which is literally 4 feet this big by 12, which I showed you additional 2 feet here.
Right, but it's a question, like we do approve 12-foot long newsstands when they're 6 feet wide,
right,
because of a determination by predecessors and others,
right,
that the ratio of that particular newsstand is a better aesthetic for the millions of people who are not working inside, but walking by and looking at the newsstand or buying whatever. So, I mean, it's necessary, I think, not to simply deal with this on a case-by-case basis and advocate for something that, in our view, is inconsistent with the guidelines, but to suggest, and I don't know, that we may look at those guidelines again to see whether those aesthetic rationales. I certainly feel that it's not appropriate for us to individually, despite your always excellent presentations, to go and violate our own guidelines without any sort of better evidence other than the fact that the people may be you are saying that they may be uncomfortable inside because they pack the inside and outside of there with lots of things like machines and refrigerators, all of which may be fine economically, not necessarily our primary focus. But this, just to articulate here, to have a 12-foot long wall that is the first thing millions of people see when they immediately walk out of the main entrance of the Javits Center as a sort of low-level billboard is not my idea of great urban design. Now, you may say, well, is it all that different than a 10-foot long? We would say, yes, we think it is. But we're not immune to sort of saying, okay, maybe we have to look again at these ratios. But I don't think it's appropriate for us to violate these guidelines for these particular two instances, and I will definitely not vote in favor of those. I don't know if I speak for anyone else, but I don't object to your thinking that, well, guys, you got it wrong. Maybe we did get it wrong. But we should look at it holistically, not just to say on a case-by-case basis for those newsstands who are fortunate enough to have you as their advocate. That doesn't make any sense to me.
Okay, well, I will say it's about the health and comfort of the individuals. So I can't imagine the millions of people that walk out of the Javits Center across the street will be affected by 24 additional split inches of the back of the newsstand. It's the case of the health and comfort of an individual versus 24 more inches of a billboard. I'm just making that clear here today.
And
like, I understand what you're
something
saying.
we think about. But in this particular case, I think we have to go with our guidelines.
Yes, and that's exactly correct. And if you've got some data that would help persuade us that this is a very difficult condition, again, remember, we're thinking about the rest of the public here. We're not thinking about the individual who is staffing the newsstand. And so if there are some real health concerns or whatever, they should be brought to our attention so that we can factor that into our decision. But at the moment, I was actually on the group that made the decision on the proportions of the newsstands relative to the sidewalk widths and relative to the structure themselves. And that was a while ago. Again, as Commissioner Aaron said, it's subject to review. But we will not, if you would like approval, we are prepared to approve this newsstand at the dimension of our guidelines. If you want to withdraw it and see if we change our mind, you can do that too.
Okay. So are you saying that going forward, you will take it into consideration, or you're not going to take it into consideration?
I think we'll discuss among ourselves whether
we should change the guidelines.
We should change the guidelines, yes.
Okay.
We will consider it.
Okay. Anyone else?
No. Is there anyone here who's testifying?
No one on the board has anything else to say? Okay. In addition to that, the following application, we are talking about 12 inches. 12 inches.
Look,
Please tell me you can
it doesn't
understand.
matter what you're asking for. We have guidelines and we follow them.
So you're saying it doesn't matter that humans are being affected with their health,
We need,
basically for 12 inches. That's what you're saying.
that's
What you're saying.
Yes.
I just want to make that clear.
Well, I
That's
don't
what our
adjudicate
whole
on health. I don't adjudicate on health. I've never seen anything brought before me that demonstrates that individuals are are suffering because of that in their health. That's never been made clear to myself or any other member of the commission or the commission staff.
Okay.
If they had, of course, we would take it seriously.
Okay. Well, I'm presenting it to you now.
Well,
I'm not
that's
sure
not,
it's
you're not presenting.
I wanted to avoid bringing 200 new stand operators here. I really wanted to avoid that because they'll speak to it, they work in there.
Well, then,
I wanted
if
to
we're
avoid-
going to reconsider our guidelines, we've got to reconsider it, you know, all the factors together.
Sure. May I just add that it doesn't seem to me that the absolute dimension is the key, but it's what goes into the newsstand, which may be affecting health if they're overcrowding it. In other words, if you have a particular size that fits within the guidelines, then the operator, I think, needs to balance how much he can put into it.
I understand, sir, but when you talk about 70 square feet and you're trying to support a family of 4, you have to have backup drinks because if you run out, you can't sell any. We're talking about 12 inches and 24 inches. I'm not asking you to overhaul your guidelines. I am not asking you to make drastic changes. There's 2 bullet points in front of you. I'm asking you to consider revising for health benefits to individuals working in the business. I'm not asking for much more than that. That's simply all I'm saying.
And we're simply saying we're not going to do that until we take a broader look at this and drill down on some of the questions that you raised. But, I mean, health issues could be challenged by the kind of equipment that they have in there. And we originally approved a newsstand, not a deli, not
no one said it was a deli.
a
We
large
can't sell food.
machine dispenser. We approved a newsstand.
Right. And it's
Right,
operated as a
so
newsstand.
maybe now newsstands have taken on a different function and that there is equipment being put into them that requires maybe a different kind of ventilation system or something. So we're prepared to look at all of that.
Okay.
And absolutely.
Okay, great.
So what do you want to do?
Okay, so I will speak to my clients and make sure that they move forward with the recommended sizes that the commission put forward today. But going forward, I will be at every meeting discussing just this, unless you have other objections, which I would happily speak to.
No, but I think we
have
should
a larger
work
discussion
together.
with DCA and like offline.
Sure.
Like,
Sure.
separate from this,
Sure.
which we will do.
Okay,
That would be good.
that would be helpful. Okay, great. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
So are we voting on, sorry.
Are we?
You want us to
do you
Yeah,
vote?
so, yeah, we'll move forward with the sizes recommended.
Okay, so the first one.
All right, so the first is item 25937. This is the one on the screen, 418 11th Avenue. All in favor of the 4 by 10 dimension, which is not the one proposed by the applicant, but the one that is in our guidelines, the largest possible.
So we are approving, but only with the guidelines.
Consistent with the guidelines. What is
Consistent with the
consistent with the
guidelines,
guidelines?
yes.
Okay.
And I think we should give it preliminary approval. I think they'll need to give us a plan.
Yeah,
that
we'll
shows
give you the.
4 by 10.
Sure, sure.
So this would be a
Conditioned upon the
But-
return with the.
Sure, I'm happy to revise the consent. Do we really need another DOT approval though? Because it's already been approved for a larger size. I don't understand why we need another approval.
That's
for
not
small.
why I don't.
What the DOT's decide.
When you either increase or reduce the size of a newsstand, you can reveal a, utility cap or something that ends up in that wingspan of clear space that's required.
Okay.
I can't say with any certainty right now that that would be a problem, but I think we do need to go out and look at it again. with
Okay,
the size.
so I'll send it to you. Okay.
And while we're on that excellent subject, because of the sidewalk conditions, it would be great to maybe push to take the adjustment on one end, because the sidewalk actually is radically narrower on one end of it. Can we go to that slide?
South, right?
Yeah, this jog.
So see that jog there? So it would be, obviously, if we could move it to the north, if we could take the inches to the, off from the southern end. See what you're saying? Because of the
Okay, that's
jog of the sidewalk, is that okay with you?
That's fine.
Okay.
So off the left side, right? Just leave it off the left.
Yeah. Off the right side.
Okay, so you want to shave it 2 feet here?
Yes, exactly, here, there, because of that curve in that.
That's fine.
Thank you.
Okay, so all in favor of this application at 4 foot by 10 feet, please raise your right hand. Thank you. Okay, that is approved. Second newsstand is at 1362 Jerome Avenue, southeast corner of Jerome and Elliott Place in the Bronx. It is item 25938. This one is being requested at 6 by 12.
Yeah, the request is 6 by 12.
But the sidewalk dimension is insufficient, is that the situation? And so therefore, we would recommend 5 by 12 for the sidewalk clearance. All in favor of 5 by 12 in this location, please raise your right hand. Thank you. Okay, that is approved.
Thank you for your time. Is it here or? Either way, move on. Thank you.
All right, so now we will move on to the 11:45 item, which is the reconstruction of bus stops and adjacent site work at Riverside Park on Riverside Drive between West 79th Street to West 129th Street. It is item 25939. Okay, so we'll just check and see if there's anyone here to testify.
No one's here, so.
Both of them?
So we appear not to have any testimony on this item. The project has been reviewed and is recommended for approval. If there's no one here from the public, I think we can proceed to vote on this without testimony. I will note that Commissioner Shepherd was recused from this project. All in favor of these newsstands, please raise. Oh, sorry, we need a so moved.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, please raise your hand. Thank you. All right, this is approved. And our last item today is item 25940, reconstruction of the Well House landscape at Prospect Park, 200 Well House Drive, Brooklyn. This project was also previously reviewed and recommended for approval without a formal presentation. We do not appear to have anyone speaking for the public, and based on that, would someone make a motion to approve?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Sure, quite a tight team. All in favor, please raise your right hand. Thank you. Approved, and the public meeting is now adjourned. Thank you.